Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was June 16th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Molt Cara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today's document is from that weird new register, the Comune Sigilli Secreti from Joan. And remember, I'm calling it weird because its designation seems to be a contradiction. Like a Comune register that's also a secret seal. It doesn't make sense to me. And they started this, today's document is from folio 11V to 12R. So they just started this. I don't know why 6 months in they were like, ooh, we need a register that is going to be both the Comune and the secret seal together. I don't know why they suddenly felt a need for that. Oh, goodness. Now, this document picks up on a thread that we've explored in a few episodes, and it is regarding Isabella de Majorca. Now, Isabella de Majorca, really interesting person. When last we talked about her, it was, I think, on April 21st, when I was researching Jean III, the Count of Armagnac, and learning a little bit more about what was going on in Armagnac and how Jean decided that he was going to do an invasion of the Crown of Aragon I don't know when he made that decision, but he carried out the invasion in 1388. And part of his plan was his claim to Majorca. And where did he get that claim? Well, Isabella sold him her title, which is apparently something you could do. And it's very clear that Isabella de Majorca is in major debt. And today's document ties into the evidence for that. It corroborates all of these other sources about her financial destitution, because here it is June and Joan has decided to grant her another extension on her safe passage in the Crown of Aragon that had originally been issued all the way back in February. So in episode 61 of the podcast, I think was the first time we had encountered Isabella de Majorca, and that was a document in which Joan granted her safe passage, specifically mentioning that no one could take any money from her or take any of her horses. And in that document, it was interesting because there was like a cross out about the number of horses. There was this misunderstanding or correction made regarding whether the number of horses that Isabella would have with her would be 60 or 100 horses. Yeah. And then on April 21st, Joan sends a document to the folks over at the border fort between France and the Crown of Aragon, the Salses fort, and says to them, go meet Isabella de Majorca. She's going to be at the fort, and I want her escorted through the Crown of Aragon. I guess implication being she's on her way to Barcelona. So she was not to just wander around. Well, maybe it was to ensure that the the safe passage document was respected, but she's not just going to be wandering around on her own, at least at the beginning of her time entering the Crown of Aragon. But now it's a couple months later, and maybe she has been wandering around. I don't know. This document does not say where she's been. Although maybe this is a good time to discuss a little bit of the trouble that I ran into with the artificial intelligence method that I've been using. So today's episode is being recorded on the other side of a week away. I was out of town. I was in Montreal for the Digital Humanities Summer Institute put on by the Université de Montréal. And it was a really interesting time. I was in a session called AI Literacy, in which a bunch of academics from all over North America gathered. There was about 20 of us gathered to discuss what does AI literacy mean and how should instructors teach AI literacy or adapt their assignments in this new era of AI. And so that conversation was interesting. It was definitely fraught with all kinds of anxieties and stresses and like a grieving process for how AI has really destroyed a lot of favorite assignments that people have had and given to their college students, like essay writing. And within that context, I was thinking a lot about the ethics of AI and the use of AI that I've been doing and whether it is moral to be engaging with these models that are so energy intensive and their training sets are based on a lot of stolen information, uncompensated use of scholarly material, and also labor exploitation for the part of the model training that involves human decision making on stuff that needs to be that kind of antisocial stuff that needs to be trained out of the model before it can be released to the public. So there's just all kinds of ethical problems, including, the intellectual property issues that I've already spoken about on the podcast, which is, I am training these AI models and giving them the ability to access some of this material that, is the product of the Spanish government and not my own work product doing the digitization here. So there's all kinds of ethical problems. But in the middle of that also came the release of Anthropic's latest model, Fable 5. Fable 5 is reputed to be extremely powerful. It is based on this model called Mythos. And just note the kind of very intentional marketing dynamics involved in the names of these models. But anyway, Mythos was reported earlier in the year, a couple months ago maybe, to be so dangerous that Anthropic had to give an advanced warning to the government and some banks and other big, software entities. And it couldn't release it right away because the model was so good at exploiting different weaknesses in finding bugs, hacking potential, whatever. I mean, I do believe that it was a concern, a legitimate concern. So here we are. It's June 12th, I think, and Anthropic released Fable 5, and then the government came in and basically said, you have to guarantee that no foreign national, no one outside the United States, who's not a U.S. citizen, or even inside the United States, who's not a U.S. citizen, will be able to use it. And otherwise, you'll have hefty fines and all kinds of penalties. And so Anthropic had to then restrict access to that model. Is this related to the problem that I had today? So I'm recording this on June 15th, and today when I set about to do my usual routine with a register that I had not put through the OpenClaw pipeline, so today's document is from register 1867, I first put the document into Gemini. It got a transcription done. I did notice there were some big problems. Like, once again, Gemini just was so insistent on thinking that this is Isabella d'Armagnac. Isabella from Armagnac, who was, I think, like, not even alive at this point. It's so weird. It just cannot read Majorca for some reason. It's just so set, even though Majorca is in this document a bunch of different times. Weird. Anyway, Gemini did its transcription, and then I went to Claude, and the part that begins the process with Claude is stage 1 of a 3-stage process. And before I went to Montreal, the first week of June, no problems with using Claude for all 3 stages of the transcription and translation that I usually would do. And then today, boom, stage 1, I exceeded my usage limit. It wouldn't even complete just stage 1. It said, your usage is up, and you can upgrade if you want to be able to do this. And so how much would it cost to upgrade? Well, I'm currently paying $17 a month for a quote-unquote pro account. And if I wanted to upgrade, the next tier would be $100 a month. And no, that's not going to work for me. So I am priced out of using Claude today for the stuff that I was using Claude for regularly. Now you might wonder, well, what model is it? Well, it's not Fable 5, but I think there is a higher level of Opus that came out, but I didn't use that one. I was using a lower model of Opus 4.6. So I can't for the life of me understand why the usage limit has been dramatically reduced for me. It could be that Anthropic, due to all the hype, has suddenly gotten a lot more customers. I think people are rapidly moving away from ChatGPT, not only because of how it seems that Claude is a superior product at this point, but also the just a whole additional level of ethical problem with OpenAI. That company seems to just step in to the worst for the ethical dimension. Like when Anthropic says no, OpenAI is there ready to say yes, like with the Pentagon contract earlier this year. So I think maybe there's just a lot more users of Claude now, just in the last couple weeks. I will say that this did happen to me earlier in the year, sometime like in early April, where Claude was just giving me these really harsh usage limits. And, maybe it's about the time of day. Maybe I need to try to do this at a different time of day. I don't know. But, this whole story of AI usage and how it's rolling out, it really highlights how the greatest opportunities to use AI are definitely going to go to the people who can pay more money. It's a very economic situation, traditional supply and demand. All right. Well, let's get back to the document itself. So this is a Latin document, so of course I'm not going to be able, without the help of the AI, to recognize any subtleties. I scanned this document for any words that would jump out at me, like anything having to do with the Count of Armagnac, or like displeasure or penalties, but it all seemed to be pretty boilerplate. nothing jumped out as like an alarming word. It's all very calm language as far as I can tell. There's a little bit of a threat at the end, and I think that that is directed toward whoever might decide to ignore the safe passage conduct. So they'll have really bad penalties if they end up taking some of Isabella de Majorca's stuff, taxing her, or confiscating, repoing maybe any of her property in order to satisfy the repayment of whatever debts she has accrued. This document, I mentioned the horses before, this document is going wholeheartedly into 100 horses. There is in line 13 of folio, the document on folio 11V, the first half of it, line 13, centum equitum. So there's 100 horses, no doubt about it now. And I think that's, all I can really dig out of this. There is an interesting moment where the earlier safe passage letter is referred to by date. That's at the top of folio 12R. And it says the 23rd of March. Now what's interesting is that the document that I found from February 23rd was one that was a safe passage. So maybe it got rewritten in March too. But it's interesting that the day of the month matches, but the month name is not matching. So was that some kind of error? I don't know. I would be totally comfortable with the idea that there was another document written in March. But there is something interesting about the February document, which is that it has a note in it saying that it was renewed in May. So lots of interesting chancery operation going on here, referring back to earlier things, notations for later things. It's kind of an interesting chancery procedure set of documents to look at. So of course, on the webpage for today's document, I'll have links to those earlier episodes so that you can take a look at it and put it all together if you would like to. One last thing I want to say about this document, the probata has a really interesting additional 2 lines beyond what you usually see. The probata starts very normally, Dominus Rex mandavit mihi per de beniore. So it's pretty typical kind of probata in those first 2 lines. The Lord King commanded me per, and then the name of the scribe, per de beniore. Then, though, we have an additional 2 lines, which puts an additional twist on this whole thing. Vidit eam Dominus Rex et eam ex per, and then something like, what? Oh gosh, what is that? I feel like I was able to read that before. Now it's per mandavit ex per or ex pre mandavit. I'm not quite sure what the last line is saying anymore. So express, no, I don't think it would be that. It's a mystery, but the third line, vidit eam, it means that he saw it. So this probata is saying that the king himself laid eyes on this document and then afterward had some kind of additional action with this document procedurally. So that's super interesting because, we don't have that understood by default, apparently, that the king would have seen it. Sometimes the king sees it and sometimes he doesn't. And then here there's a need to specify that the king had seen this document. So I think that's a little window into this question that we've had all along about how much participation do the monarchs have in the creation composition of these documents, because here we have this other level, like maybe it's redundant, like maybe it's just like, okay, we always know that the king has some level of seeing the information, but now we're just going to add it in there because sometimes the scribes are just redundant. I don't think that last thing I said is actually the case. I just want to put it out there as a possibility where you can't just automatically draw inferences from something like this. But I think at this point, I am really leaning towards saying that when you don't have a little statement like this, when you do not have vidit eam dominus rex, well, I think that means that the king, the monarch, whoever's writing it, is not really that involved. And this indicates that there is some involvement. Now, why would that be? It seems like a very boilerplate kind of document to me. It just is, this is something that could have happened in conversation. The Chancellor, Franciscus Sarcostas, he could have said, hey, Joan, Isabella de Majorca wants another extension on her safe passage. And Joan could have been like, yeah, okay, just do it. Why? What about this made it so that the king himself wanted to look at it or needed to look at it? Oh, well, there you have it, folks. Yet another question raised and not answered. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt cara companiona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, well, I've done my job. Remember, the motto of the Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, and listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.